Hi there, you're listening to the Guitar Speak podcast, produced in Sydney, Australia. My name is Matt Wakeling. Thank you so much for joining me today. Now this week we speak to Michael Molenda, who is the editor-in-chief of Guitar Player magazine. Now Guitar Player are celebrating their 50th anniversary this year, which is an incredible achievement. And it was great to catch up with Michael to tell us what's happening over at GP, how they're celebrating this wonderful milestone, but also to find out a bit more about his backstory, how he ended up as a journalist, his guitar background, and some of the creative projects he's been involved in, including the recent Gretchen Menn album. All right, let's get straight to it. Here's my conversation with Michael Molenda. Michael Molenda, welcome to the Guitar Speak podcast.
Thanks, Matt. Thanks for having me.
Man, our pleasure, our great pleasure. Now, this year's a really big year for you, I guess, as the editor-in-chief of Guitar Player magazine, and being the 50th anniversary, and I'd love to speak about that. But first up, how about yourself? I want to find out about you a little bit more. What was your first experience as a guitar player? What led you to the guitar in the first place?
Well, I'm old enough to where the Beatles on Ed Sullivan 1964 was the main thing.
Yep.
But I really didn't know what that meant. I just know that seemed awesome and magical, and I should do that, whatever that was. And I think it was a couple of years later when I saw The Who on the Today Show or something, and that's what really fired it off. You know, it was like all the girls screaming and. You know, I didn't feel like I looked like a matinee idol, and there's Pete Townsend with a nose almost as big as mine, you know, getting all these girls screaming, and I thought that's what I want to do. I can do that. And then of course it took a while to actually figure out what doing that actually meant, you know, surviving a lot of elderly guitar teachers who were correcting the notes on the Beatles sheet music I was bringing them to teach me to play.
Okay.
It was tough in the 60s, man. It's like trying to learn rock and roll the normal way, you know, the way that your parents would help you pay for the lessons for, you know, was not always the easiest thing in the world.
Sure. So when so what happened with that? When did it click into gear, or when did you feel like, okay, I'm making a bit of progress in this rock and roll thing I'm chasing? In terms of your guitar playing?
Well, I think like most people, you find some friends who have the same, the same experience and the same desires. I mean, one thing that the 97-year-old guitar teachers taught me was chords and things like that. So I had a little bit of a head start.
Sure.
Once friends started coming together and saying, you know, they wanted to play songs or jam on blues and stuff like that. So it was really that, finding two or three friends who were into it, and then from there I just kind of stumbled into people that had bands and learned from them, and then decided, okay, I'm gonna start my own bands and give it a shot. So you know, I'm sure it's no different than anybody else who's gone that route.
Sure. Do you remember your first guitars?
Well, acoustics, of course, which were horrible.
Yeah.
I think I found a clone Les Paul at a music store I was taking lessons at, and of course I was like really into Mick Ronson and all that, and Mark Bolan. So Les Paul was the thing. Of course, you know, a black one didn't look like what theirs was, but at least it kind of looked like the same shape as they were holding. So I said, I've got to have that. And of course, it was just horrible. I mean, it was like dancing on a tightrope trying to play that thing. And then I think the first real guitar I had was a Gibson L6S.
Oh, okay, nice.
Also not an awesome choice, but
oh, really?
It was what I could afford. Well, it was funny because I had that in my hand. I could probably afford that or a Fender Strat, and at that time the Strat just felt like it wasn't really wood. I know that sounds kind of weird, but at least where I was, I think it was at Guitar Center in San Francisco, and it just didn't feel good to me. I mean, since then, of course, I love Strats like all other guitars, but but right then I just kind of felt like the L6S seems like a more meaty guitar, and I probably should have got the Strat, but oh well, regrets. ...
I think we've all got those guitar stories. You had the fork, which one?
Yeah.
And I don't know about you, but for me, and I mean a lot of guys I know, to get the next guitar, you had to sell the first guitar, and then I don't know if you got the. Did you hang on to your guitars?
At that point, I probably didn't, you know.
Hmm.
And a friend of mine had gotten a real Les Paul with mini humbuckers, and I kind of conned him, quote unquote, into letting me borrow it like for a long time until
Okay.
the point where I was getting phone calls about, you're going to give it back. It actually is my guitar,
Yeah,
you
yeah.
know. Uh,
So that would have
and then
been
at that point,
a
yeah,
deluxe with the
I think
minis. Yeah.
yeah, no, that was a standard. I
Oh,
did
okay.
get a custom um, later on that actually was natural. So I did make it to the Mick Ronson vibe
Nice,
finally.
nice. And you mentioned bands. What sort of things were you doing in bands at that time?
Oh, just horrible, horrible, horrible cover bands playing at frat houses and stuff like that. All the typical '70s rock stuff that everybody else played. Nothing, I wish there was more, you know, awesome stuff to tell you, but it was like pretty horrible, basically.
But were you digging it? Were you having a great time?
Absolutely.
Yeah.
I mean, that's the thing about the guitar. I mean, it didn't matter how crappy I was or how crappy the bandmates were. I mean, I just always felt that standing up with this thing across, strapped on to me and having
Hmm.
an amp screaming behind me was just the the ultimate bliss. I mean, it didn't matter where I was or what I was doing or whether people were throwing beer cans at me or clapping. It just this
Yep.
this was what I wanted to do.
Yeah. Wow. Awesome. I've read that sort of moving into the late '70s, you're really engaging with the punk scene in San Francisco, both the music and also writing. You were writing by then. Is that true?
Yeah, yeah, yeah. I mean, I heard the Sex Pistols, Nevermind the Bullocks, walking into a record store once,
Uh
and it
huh.
was just, I kind of had the same thing that all the punks had, except like a year later, where, I couldn't be Yes, I couldn't be, I didn't think I had the talent to be those kind of bands. All my friends were like into prog by then, and it's just like, I don't know what to do. I can't think that way or play that way. And to hear that, it was just like, oh, oh my God, I can do this. I can write songs like this and have that kind of energy and impact. And also the social thing appealed to me, because being kind of in San Francisco during the Summer of Love and the civil rights and women's rights and all
Yeah.
that.
Yeah.
It's just the fact that the punks were standing up for something more than just wearing, you know, uh, weird shirts on stage or glitter.
Hmm.
I was like, well, this is awesome. I can not only have a good time doing what I love, but I can talk about what's going on in society, which was extremely attractive.
Sure. Yes. Yeah. What sort of writing were you getting into? Well, maybe I should back up. Did you always love writing as well as a kid? Did that always
Yeah,
form part of you?
yeah,
Yeah.
absolutely, absolutely. I mean, I knew I wanted to be a writer. I was writing probably dumb, stories when I was probably 8 or 9, and then that obviously translated to writing music as well. But
Yeah.
I always wanted to be a writer with a lowercase w.
What do you mean? What's the lowercase for?
Well, as opposed to like an arrogant, snotty writer with an uppercase w.
Gotcha. Gotcha. That's cool. We writing. I think I read you were writing for punk fanzines and things like that at the time as well.
I started a few and I wrote for a few. I mean, the thing about the punk thing, like a lot of groups back then, was it was an attractive group to be in. It was more than just music. I mean, it was art,
Yes.
writing,
Yeah. Yeah.
painting. There was a whole community around what you would call punk uh, culture,
Yeah.
and that was attractive. It was also scary because, of course, you walk down the street with green hair spiked up, people are going to beat the crap out of you. But I guess I actually liked that too. It just seemed, dangerous and kind of dark and very romantic, I guess.
Uh huh.
It's not very romantic to get your butt kicked, but it's I think all of that kind of factored into the community and
Sure.
why it was such. I mean, we used to play. I'm sure you probably heard the Mabuhay Gardens, which was the big San Francisco punk club
Yeah,
on
yeah,
Broadway,
yep.
and the mayor at the time would raid the club, on a whim. You'd be sitting there playing, and all of a sudden the tax squad would move in because we were so dangerous to society. A bunch of kids just looking different. So
Yeah.
so it was really a thing about the power of music, the power of how music's perceived by culture, how to be on the right and the wrong side of that culture. It was really a heavy time for me.
Yeah, wow. That's huge. I think in Australia, I don't know. I mean, I remember the era, of course, but by the time a lot of that filtered down here, and I don't know, some people might disagree, but it was definitely less of a social force. There was a punk movement down here, and there were some great bands like the Saints that were maybe proto-punk influences to some of the stuff going on over, even overseas. But
I think the Saints started it. I mean, they didn't look like punks, but I think they were probably the first band in that '70s era that really kicked it off. I mean, the
mhm.
Sex Pistols obviously listened to them, and
Yeah,
um,
definitely.
so I think you lot get the credit for that one.
Yeah, nice. So we'll jump on that. I think I just mean the social movement to me seemed different, but then again, I was younger. I was sort of around 10 years old. So yeah, maybe I'm missing that. So you were talking about writing music and creating, and it seemed like from what I've learnt about you, you were into creating a lot of things. Tell me about Street Beat. That was a broader kind of a theatrical rock sort of thing. What was that all about?
Uh, well, I'd always kind of hated how Broadway had kind of treated rock, and I thought, with the arrogance of youth, right? Well,
Yeah.
I'm going to write a real rock and roll musical that's going to be ugly and loud and really what it's like. And uh, once again, I didn't quite know what to do, but I got lucky because I had a manager at the time who put me in touch with a choreographer and a director and a visual artist, and I basically wrote the libretto for that and had the concept. But once again, I was helped by people putting all the things together, and so it was basically a rock band with projections on stage, dancers dancing, bringing the tableaus to life, so to speak. There was found sound and sound effects were incorporated
Yep.
into it, and we opened at Bill Graham's Wolfgang Club, and the woman who ran it said, I guess called Bill and said, "Man, you got to come down here. This place is sold out. I don't even know who this band is." And we
Wow.
were helped. Of course, there was a lot of radio promo. I mean, there was a ton of luck involved in this, but the curtain parted and it's a sold out club. I mean, it was almost difficult for me to continue, because it's like, because you just think like, you're just absolutely almost gutted with fear about this. The curtain's going to open. There's going to be three. My mom's going to be there and my dad,
Yeah,
and
yeah.
and and to have that actually resonate and go over well was just a major it was a major high for me, and that really kind of set the tone for the rest of my life, feeling that maybe I can do this. Of course, the downside was investors and sharks corralled around, and I signed the wrong contract,
Hmm.
and it got swallowed up, and I ended up with basically nothing out of it. But I'm still very proud of what we did because I think that was probably one of the first multimedia rock shows in San Francisco.
Okay. And interesting to note that you said, yeah, so that gave you the confidence to think you could pull off some concepts or pull off a grand effort, some sort of creative effort in in that field. But obviously that seems to have filtered through your life in different areas as well. For example, moving into commercial journalism, um, some of the other projects you've worked on, the Gretchen Menn album I'd like to talk about at some stage as well that's just come out.
Sure.
Your involvement in that. What's your earliest remembrance of Guitar Player magazine? Obviously, you were a reader before you entered that world professionally.
Yeah, it was from taking guitar lessons at a local music store and just seeing it on the racks there. And I mean, there was really nothing. This was probably early to mid 70s. And of course, there was no other magazines where you saw guitar players on the cover of magazines that I
Yeah,
knew
sure.
of. I mean, maybe Downbeat did, but I wasn't really that into jazz, so
Okay.
I didn't see that.
Yeah.
Um, so I just started buying it, and once again, that world was kind of, the mysteries that I couldn't figure out on myself, like hey, how to get a good tone, what's available out there as far as strings, what are people like Hendrix and Alvin Lee and all these people using, how are the records that I like being made, and oh, who's this country guy? I never heard of this guy, and then the whole thing about the jazz guys providing lessons, which I couldn't really understand, but there was something mystical about that, like playing over nights and being so intellectual about everything, which ultimately wasn't what attracted me to the guitar, and to this day still really isn't. But
Hmm.
it just felt like there was this whole world of mystery and wonder, and it was just in these pages, like it's there. It's like I don't have to search for it, because this is obviously pre-internet days. It's
Yeah,
like
sure.
if you didn't talk to somebody who knew what they were talking about, a buddy or whatever, you were kind of lost. You had to figure it out on your own. And your buddies weren't always the most reliable, fountains of information either.
Sure.
So,
Yeah.
so it was great. It was great to have the guitar player there to be kind of like the arbiter of truth.
One thing I've always loved about guitar players, they've embraced a lot of different styles. Um, so for me, I mean, what you're saying really resonates as well. I'm sure lots and lots of people um, for whom Guitar Play magazine's been a big part of their life. My first guitar player was my dad came home, would have been the late 80s, and gave me the Vernon Reid cover story, which was,
Uh-huh.
I think Joe Gore wrote that story. And it was amazing. I had no idea who Vernon Reid was. I hadn't heard of Living Colour at that stage, but I knew all about his story. And a couple of months later, when Cult of Personality ended up on Australian radio, yeah, I felt like I had an in. I felt like I already knew what his rig was like, and his whole aesthetic and his philosophy towards that stuff. And yeah, amazing, amazing. As you're saying, it just opened a whole world. Did you have any favorite covers, or did you your first guitar player experiences? Do you remember any particular cover stories or things that have stuck with you?
Well, probably Jeff Beck. I think I think Jeff Beck was probably the earliest one I can remember. I
Hmm.
mean, I mean, pretty much everything. Like, I mean, I wasn't really that into if they had a pedal steel player on the cover or something like that,
Sure.
but all the rock and jazz guys, I was definitely attracted to. I mean,
Yeah.
I just wanted to absorb as much as possible within
Sure.
reason. Like at that point, I was fairly afraid of jazz and snotty about country, but definitely rock, and I was way into that.
Yeah. Great. Um, I'm maybe skipping some years, but how do you go from in your local music shop, flicking through Guitar Player, waiting for your guitar lesson? How do you end up coming on staff, or what's your entry into music journalism at all, perhaps?
Uh, I had a bit of a career as a player in Europe. Met my first wife there,
Hmm.
came back to the United States and opened a recording studio.
Yep.
I was kind of bummed out by that. It wasn't what I expected. I mean, I was working with a lot of bands that just, didn't seem to be that good, and it was kind of a drag. So I was moping around the house, and she was reading the paper, and she said, well, you know what? You've got a journalism degree. Here's this magazine that says they need an editor. Why don't you quit moping around the house and go see if you can get this job?
Uh huh.
So that was for electronic musician,
Okay.
and
Yep.
which was also a part of Mix magazine in those days. And like, which sometimes happens with me, if I walk in and I'm so Dean Martin about it, like I don't care, it usually ends up being handed to me, which doesn't always work. And I didn't do that as some kind of psychological ploy, but I just went, I'm getting tossed out of the house to have to look for a job. And, and, uh, and they offered it to me. And, it was awesome. At first I thought, this is so not rock and roll. How am I going to deal with this? And then it just turned out to be, it kind of re-fired up my love for writing and editing.
Yeah.
And it turned out to be, an extremely beneficial, part of, thing to happen in one's life.
When you say not very rock and roll,
Well, I just, I came back from playing. I came back from playing, in Europe, opening up for big bands and all that. And I just had that snotty, stupid, selfish, arrogant attitude that, I was better than these, jerks that were writing about it. I was actually doing it.
yeah,
It was so mean and so arrogant and so stupid and so wrong. But I still had a part of that, rock star, that awful rock star, vibe just coursing through my veins, and it was ugly and horrible. And I'm glad that I was able to delete that from my life eventually. But right then I was just looking at them and going like, you guys are a bunch of wallies. What the hell,
yeah. So, but you end up inside the tent as well, I guess. But I think what's great with you seem to have brought that some of that punk aesthetic, that do-it-yourself aesthetic, and make it happen sort of attitude with your work.
Well, I mean, in publishing, it's like, you have to make it work on your own.
Yeah, yeah.
I mean, it's not like, we're writing software and getting gazillions of dollars.
Uh-huh.
Publishing has always been a struggle to serve the readers and serve the advertisers and do something good with a couple of nickels to rub together. So
Yeah.
that punk aesthetic, actually has kind of saved me at times in my life.
Uh-huh. So writing for electronic musician, I guess your background in studios and your passion for recording must have served that area well. How did you eventually end up a guitar player?
Well, I got lucky at EM because I did have that passion for recording, and it was basically kind of a computer magazine.
Mm-hmm.
And the home studio thing was starting to explode about the same time that the editor left and I was promoted to editor in chief. So I kind of switched along with the staff, the focus of the magazine to be more about home recording and less
Okay.
about just software tools and do-it-yourself gizmos and stuff like that. So
Sure.
so the magazine grew exponentially because the industry was pointing in that direction as well.
What year are we talking about here? This is kind of mid 90s?
This is probably 93-ish,
Okay. Yeah, yeah.
94. So, I kind of undeservedly got a lot of credit for being the visionary of that whole thing, but it was basically a team effort. I mean, definitely my interests were there, but there were a lot of great editors that and writers that helped, make that happen, obviously, as well as the business people.
Mm-hmm.
And guitar player was perceived by the publishers as being in a bit of a lull right then. There was a lull in circulation. There was a lull in ads. The magazine was kind of perceived as arrogant, so a lot of manufacturers weren't up for supporting it.
Okay.
So they went after me and said, I think you're, the guy to, transition this magazine, back to a place where it can be, good for the readers and good for the advertisers. I resisted them once because I didn't want to make the change. I was going through a divorce from the first wife, and it just seemed like, a divorce and a new job was a little bit too much to handle. So Richard Johnson got the job, who was a bass player, but he did a great job managing guitar player for a year.
Mm-hmm.
And then they came back to me, and I said, okay, now the timing's right. And they moved Richard to bass player, to be editor of bass player, and me at guitar player, and and that's how it happened.
Okay. Now, what's the challenge of taking that on then? If the publishers have got a certain expectation, or they see a certain problem with the magazine, yeah, what are your first steps?
Well, I mean, without stepping on any toes, I mean, I can see that a lot of the editors at that time just weren't wired the way that I was. I mean, I was kind of a socialist where everybody could do everything, everybody can contribute. And the way it was kind of set up previous to me, it was like certain people were, they were the cover story writers, or you were the gear writer, or you were the lesson writer. And in a lot of ways, there wouldn't be any crossover. Like if Art Thompson wanted to write a cover story, it would be, well, oh no, you can't do that. You're the gear guy. I don't think there was any standard mandate. It just kind of worked out that way.
Okay. Yeah, sure.
And also, I mean, I've always viewed what I do as a job like anybody else. I mean, I don't, except for that really horrible period of where I thought I was a rock star. Please forgive me for that world. Um, I really did develop into, it's just a job. You do the best you can. It's kind of like I can see my dad echoing in my head. It's just like, you sit there and you do the job and you go home and you know better than anybody else. So, so the kind of egotism that was around the magazine did well. Like I said, I'm not criticizing anybody, but I just wasn't wired that way. So immediately, what I tried to do is make everybody could do everything. That upset some people on the staff. Well, oh, now Art Thompson can do a cover story. How's that going to work out? Well, of course, it worked out great because people were, enthused about doing things. I also couldn't see how you could segregate certain aspects of the magazine production and make it successful. You can't just say, all you can do is lessons. That's all you're going to do. It's like there's more work that needs to be done than there are staffers typically. So, you kind of have to be able to multitask. So, I'm trying to be long. So the challenge was to get the staff engaged and happy and get people who really believed in the magazine. Not that some people didn't, but just were willing to set their egos aside and do the best for the magazine rather than the best for their byline. Does that make sense?
Yeah, sure.
Uh, and once again, I'm treading very lightly here because I respected everybody who worked for the magazine, and I certainly respected the people who, were there who decided to leave. They're all awesome and talented. But I think what we ended up with was a staff that was willing to work together a lot more joyfully and a lot more collaboratively. And as a result, we increased circulation by, I think, over 30,000 the first year, completely redesigned the magazine. Manufacturers were less concerned. They felt that our arrogance had dissipated. We were willing to work with them more on reviews and everything else. And, for a time, it became extremely, extremely rosy. And once again, it looked like I was forging this, but I was just a part of something that, worked out. Everybody was, one for one, one for all.
It's interesting hearing a bit of this backstory because as a reader, I'm not picking up any of that vibe at all. I'm just still seeing GP. There's some different names coming through. There's some names sort of hanging around. And yeah, it's interesting. I mean, I guess it's with any organization when you're involved in the running and being part of it, you see the behind the scenes stuff, obviously. But I think, as a reader on the other, very much on the other side, you just see guitar player changing, growing, shifting gears a little bit. I guess with any big organization, though, Michael, there's going to be shifts in management and style and all that stuff. So,
one thing I really appreciate about the staffs were even back to the first sale, when, Jim Crockett sold it, which was fairly, that was a pretty seismic move, through anything that I had to go through, anything any of the others had to go through, or having to go through the challenges of producing a magazine today when resources are not as bountiful as they were, 10 or 15 or 20 years ago. The staffs have always been awesome and not letting the readers know that there were challenges, sometimes, incredible upheavals going on, and they always just put out a classy product. So I've always appreciated that about everyone who's ever worked for that magazine. They never let the public see, the challenges.
Sure. You talk about resources. I find it interesting that two of the big areas of your life, namely recording and print media, have have experienced a massive upheaval with the digital revolution that we're deep within at the moment. What's your take on that, and how do you respond to that as a magazine editor and someone who loves recording?
Well, at first at EM, because I had spent a career having my hand slapped every time I reached for a fader in the big studios, I think I was probably too much of an evangelist for the home thing.
Mm-hmm.
It's like, let's take the power back, give it to the musicians. That's where, let's put the power to manifest their work in the hands of the actual creators. But I never wanted all the cool studios to close. I mean, that
You wanted both.
that wasn't part of the deal.
Sure.
But that happened, and I think that's that was incredibly sad. I think we've lost a legacy of sound production that probably that may not ever come back.
Mm-hmm.
There's the good side of it where anything you produce, as long as there's content there or a song that people love, it doesn't matter whether it sounds a little thin or whether it has full bandwidth or whether it's a little distorted. I can see where that's a wonderful thing. It's on the content, not necessarily the delivery system.
Sure.
On the other hand, there was a lot to be said for professional engineers who spent their lives learning how to get the most wonderful, beautiful guitar sound out of a guitar and or the drum set. And you listen to some of those records in the 70s and 80s, and they still, whether they sound dated or not, the sounds are awesome. So and it's a mixed bag on that one.
Sure.
And everybody who has a laptop and recording software isn't necessarily a great producer or engineer, obviously.
Yeah.
So I think a lot of stuff out there sometimes, with me remembering what it was like, it's kind of hard to listen to some tracks and go, oh God, if only a real pro had done this, it would be awesome.
Uh-huh.
but you just have to accept it for what it is and move on. And the same with publishing. I mean, I knew my music career was going to go up and down. I never thought that the communication arts were going to be challenged. I mean, I look today where writers aren't really valued that much. A lot of media companies don't really pay for writers. Obviously the Huffington Post, it's all volunteer work for the most part.
Mm-hmm.
And that's been tough, because I've seen a lot of awesome writers and editors that I went to journalism school with or met along the way that are working selling cars or working at whatever, or working as teachers just to try to make ends meet. I mean, their careers have been ended by how the communication arts have kind of morphed into what it is today. So I'm sad about it. I'm sad that we've lost a lot of talent that doesn't have an outlet anymore. I'm sad that people don't seem to take writing that seriously as a whole. But like I said, what can you do? I don't want to be that old grandpa screaming at the kids to get off the lawn. It's like it is the way it is. And I think that on the upside, the fact that I, as a writer, can now use video and audio and have like multimedia experiences on the web is awesome. I can be a little film director about a gear review or anything else. Instagram is a great way to get your point across in 60 seconds. So there's some of the challenges are awesome challenges that I really love.
Yeah, cool. I guess all this this give and take of this time we're in now makes 50 years of Guitar Player in print all the more remarkable, really. It's an amazing achievement, given that, as you said, a lot of print media and people involved in that have been moved aside or moved into other areas. Tell me more about some of the successes at GP. We spoke about the challenges of when you first came in and rebuilding the whole idea. There's been some great innovations in the last few years. Some of the awards that really weigh a lot now were instigated under your time at GP.
Well, I mean, you always got to try to come up with something that's going to resonate and kind of excite and educate the guitar community. So, we have tried to do that with the Guitar Superstar competitions, with the Hall of Fame, which is basically back to what they did in the 70s with the Gallery of the Greats and all that
Yeah,
as
yeah.
well. We've just kind of tried to, bring it back for the modern era. And I mean, it's all just about, what can you do that's good for the guitar community that will help it grow or get some excitement in it. I mean, obviously we have to do more than just, write stuff. We actually have to be out there and do stuff as well. I'm really proud that we've got the Ronnie Montrose Award for Young Players, which recognizes teens who have transcendent talent, because
Hmm.
they're the future, obviously. So we've tried to go out there and do a lot for the community.
Hmm. The Lifetime Achievement Award, that seems to hold um, a lot of cultural capital, particularly to I mean, lots of organisations come up with awards, but in terms of the guitar community, that's a very special one.
Yeah, and we've had good reaction to that, and it's always a nice argument, amongst the staff of who actually gets it every year. So
Yeah, yeah.
that's always fun
How do
too.
you actually arrive at that? That's a good thought, good point. How do you get to who
Well,
do you choose?
well, I mean, we do have the past stuff from the Gallery of the Greats. So some of the people like Les Paul, et cetera, they've already been honored. Although I did, as I think I started this Certified Legend Award to
Yep.
actually kind of recognize those people while they were still alive. So
Hmm.
that was awesome to be able to get Les Paul before he passed, and
Yes. Yeah.
Nookie Edwards and Wayne Eddy, who are I think still around, but so that's been awesome as well. But basically, it's just you kind of know who's out there. It's probably no different than the Football Hall of Fame or whatever. And then once you look at who we haven't recognized in the past and who still needs to be recognized,
Hmm.
then it just gets down to a debate,
Yep. Sure.
and hopefully, we don't raise our voices too much.
Nice. So what are you doing to celebrate? What's planned for this year, this landmark year?
Well, we're putting a lot of legacy content into the magazine, as you probably noticed.
Yep. Yep.
Going back in the archives and trying to look at the really cool stuff that we did in the '60s, '70s, '80s, and '90s. That's been a lot of fun to go through the archives and look for things. And we even did this thing called Weird Scenes inside the GP archives, where we just found some of the weird stuff they did back then,
Hmm.
like stories on guitar stamps or guitar in prison, or let's interview the wives of famous guitar players. I mean, there, there's some real, you don't want to take, you don't want to criticize them, but it is nice to look at them and kind of have like a little bit of a whimsical smirk about what was considered news back in 30, 40, 50 years ago.
Sure. Sure.
um, uh, I'm also trying to put together a 50th anniversary concert for somewhere around the fall. That's still in process.
Hmm.
um, we're doing a lot of cover stories to try to look back uh, at what guitar means to the community, and move forward with it. We don't want to be dinosaurs, certainly. So
Yeah. Sure.
we just did this cover story on Who Will Save the Guitar, which talks very uh, honestly about the challenges of getting new players to keep playing and what the industry is doing about that. And there was even a section about, our guitar magazines part of the problem.
Hmm.
Are we too obsessed with the Hendrixes and the Becks and the Claptons, and we're not serving the needs of you know kids who are coming up today? Are we really inspiring them as much as those guys inspired us? So we're trying to ask some hard questions. The cover story after that will be about 50 sensational women players. It's about time that we gave. I mean, I've always figured that guitar playing doesn't really know what race or what sex it is. It's just the guitar, and some
Absolutely. Yes.
some body is holding on to it, and that body is either making good sounds or bad sounds.
Yeah,
But
yeah.
let's face it, I think, the guitar journalism community has not always been as open to female players as it should have been. So, we're trying to, make big inroads to that, make big inroads with beginners. So I think, to quit blabbing about it, I think the 50th anniversary for us will have some events in the fall, but also I think that we need to honor the legacy of the magazine and continue to open our doors to anyone who wants to play, whether that's someone who just wants to make noise or make a backing track or a loop for a sample, or somebody who can play like Yngwie Malmsteen.
Yeah,
We
yeah.
just have to open and embrace it. I mean, we know we want the guitar to always be vital and cool and awesome. And I think for GP can't be a dinosaur. It has to continually be progressive. So that's really what this 50th anniversary year is about. It's as much about looking to the future as it is about honoring the magazine's past.
Yeah, awesome. That's fantastic. I really think GP's always been good at that, though. I remember reading the Johnny Marr cover story had an Ingve feature inside it, and the next month I was learning all about Sonic Youth, and even now you've got stories about Novella, who's a great ambient noisemaker, alongside some down-tuned heavy metal dude. Which is wonderful. So to celebrate that and to push that forward, I think can only be a great thing.
Yeah, well, I mean, they set the mold back back in '67. We're
Hmm.
just trying to keep it moving forward.
Awesome. That's very cool. And yourself, you've stayed busy and creative this whole time by the looks of things. You've got a very cool band, The Trouble with Monkeys, where your whole mode is punked up monkey songs. That seems like a perfect one perfect place for you to be playing guitar.
Yeah, yeah, that has been it's a great band. I love all the people in it.
Hmm.
It's every time we play, people get. I mean, I know everybody says this, but everybody seems to enjoy it. Like those Monkeys songs are just whether you're 20 or 60, they're just so good, and so joyous that
Hmm.
it's. But once you add like a really obnoxiously loud guitar behind them, it's even better, I think.
Absolutely, absolutely. Well, that's the whole power pop recipe, isn't it? Like fantastic
Oh
pop
yeah,
tunes
absolutely.
with an angry guitar. I can't think of many things I enjoy more.
Yeah, it's and that also the band also allows me to test gear for the magazine in real world situations. So
Yeah, nice.
it's a multitasking thing, but also, I mean, it's just once again, I mean, I'm 61 now, but I still love jumping up and down like a teenager. I mean, the guitar has been so important uh, to my life, whether I look like some crazy old man or whether I looked cool if I was trying to in my 20s. It has
Uh-huh.
always been there to guide me and always been there to challenge me and always been there to give me joy. That it's just such a lifetime thing. I mean, if you don't allow your ego to get involved, like, well, maybe I look too old, or maybe I weigh too much, or
Hmm.
maybe I don't have hair, or maybe I should play better, or maybe I should have a better amp, or maybe I should have a better guitar. If you just throw that stuff out of there and just enjoy it for what it is, then I mean, there's so many possibilities that are open. I mean, if you ask me at 20 if I'd still be doing this, 40 years later, I'd say, are you kidding me? I hate people who are 35 who get on stage now. They're too old. you know? I mean, like in the punk days, it was like if you were, in your 30s, we didn't even want you on stage with us.
Yeah.
And I think that also, one good thing about culture moving forward is like uh, younger people today, because we've played at Gilman Street with teenagers, and that they're not as ageist as my generation was back then. I
Hmm.
mean, their whole thing is like, if you play something cool, we dig it. And I think that's a lot more positive way to be than it might have been in my era.
Yeah, absolutely. Absolutely. Hey, another another project you've recently been involved with is Gretchen Menn's new record, which is
Yeah,
fantastic.
it's
I had
it's stunning, isn't it? Isn't
oh
that record stunning?
incredible, incredible. I
You talked to her too, didn't you?
Yeah, we had Gretchen on the show last year, and
Yeah.
we've said I've got to chase her up, but we've had brief messages about talking about the new record, which would be great. But it's an incredible. Her first record, Hail Souls, was great, but this is
Mhm.
a very different place and represents a whole lot of
Oh, yeah.
progression. Tell me about your role in this album.
Well, I've always been buddies with Gretchen, and I kind of got on a little bit of a soapbox, just talking. We had coffee once, and I said I have an idea for you, and she thought she's kind of said funnily to the press or that I was going to tell her that she needs to sing because I
Okay.
guess everybody's been telling her that she needs to sing and play guitar and she's not interested in it. But
Uh-huh.
but but I just said, hey, if you make another Hail Souls 2, what I worry about, as awesome as a player you are, you're just going to be in the same old bag as everybody else trying to do instrumental guitar records. There's not a huge market for it.
Hmm.
Um, uh, Not that you can't be famous and lauded and all that and sell records, but it's tough. And wouldn't you like to do something bigger than that? Something like that.
Uh-huh.
And she went, well, what are you talking about? And it's like, well, uh, and this harkens back to Street Beat, where finally I was getting my mojo back to look at bigger projects. After being burned by that one, it took me a few decades to actually get over the fact I was so stupid to sign the contracts I
Right.
did. But I still had that desire to put a multimedia production together. So I said I'd like to do a multimedia show based on Dante's Inferno, and she was thinking about doing something bigger. I forget actually what author she was going to try to kind of do some music evoking some short stories. And she said, "That is, awesome. That's great. That's what I want to do." Now, in my mind, I was thinking that she would do something like Hail Souls, except maybe more melodic and more cinematic, and that can bring the various levels of hell that are talked about in Dante's Inferno to life.
Hmm.
And then we would have a stage show and blah blah blah. What I didn't expect was that she was going to get so uh, obsessed with the project that she would study classical arrangement, and spend all this time expanding her scope to an unbelievable level
Yeah,
that she
yeah,
was actually able to write, for string quartets and all kinds of stuff.
yeah.
And what came back, I mean, it took, 2-ish years for this to happen, but when she finally started showing the music to me, it was light years ahead of what I envisioned. I mean, she took such a huge step forward. I mean, there's still Gretchen, the awesome guitar player there,
Yep.
but there's also Gretchen, the extremely talented arranger and composer there as well. I
Yeah,
mean,
yeah.
it's just it's. I mean, you've heard the record, right? I mean, you
Yeah,
must have.
definitely. Yes.
Yeah. I mean,
Absolutely.
I mean, that's. And to me, it did what I was hoping it would do. It would take her outside of just doing another instrumental guitar record into something that is guitar based certainly, but
Hmm.
that hopefully anybody who even could care less about the guitar will go, oh my God, this is unbelievably awesome music. You know that was really my dream for her, that she would transcend the normal guitar instrumental thing and
Yeah,
move
yeah.
on to something where she could be a film composer or whatever.
Mm.
And I think it's absolutely done that.
Oh, definitely. And the production, Daniela Guitardo's production is fantastic. And it's interesting how how Gretchen dug into composition in a whole deeper level because her background was as a classical guitarist, but it seems like she dug in way deep and pulled out so many great compositional ideas. And as you said, kept the guitar in there, but there's also some beautiful violin and some vocal work. So the voices are shared around.
So I mean, basically, what I did is once came up with the the concept was I wrote the libretto for each piece, so there was a context to write on, and and that's part of the booklet you get with the record.
Yep.
And then I just acted as kind of a production consultant for the mixes. And I mean, everyone was so uh, obsessed with making sure that everything was right. That I mean, between Daniele and in Italy and Gretchen and I here in the United States, I mean, I think every song probably had, I don't know, 50 emails about what to do with the mixes. So
Wow.
it was quite a project.
Fantastic. So as a librettist, I think you've covered this. So I'm just wondering how that works practically. So you're taking Dante's Inferno, and what are you doing with that? I haven't actually read the book. I've only heard the digital recordings. So
Oh, okay.
how does that translate to then something
Well,
Gretchen works on?
it started out where we would just pick the circles of hell that were interesting and were interesting to her and me, and then we'd write about it. But throughout the process, while she was writing, I was thinking, I didn't just want to emulate Dante. I wanted to kind of bring this journey into 2016, 2017, in the modern era, and that was a little bit more daunting than I thought, actually, because how do you do something without being pedantic or being too twee about it?
Sure.
I wanted it to be almost like Hemingway-esque in the fact that it was just kind of a simple truths. So I kind of flipped out a bit about that. I felt like I'm never going to be able to do this. I don't have the chops for it. I'm sucking, blah blah blah. So it went through a number of rewrites, but I finally got something that I felt that I could imagine the circles of hell in a way that resonated with modern life. Even though Dante had obviously touched on these because
Hmm.
they're sins, but what arrogance means today. What violence means today.
Hmm.
What
Yeah, yeah.
political what politics means today. And so that's really what kind of saved me. And then it was just a matter of getting the language to the point where it wasn't overly flowery, sorry, and actually just to the point. And also knowing that this was going to be on a CD cover, it had to be short. Also, Gretchen had bought in Max Kreis to do some amazing visuals. He's a photographer and visual artist.
Hmm.
So I also didn't want to write so much that you had like this great photo and then like a million words obscuring what it is. So that was the next thing, is to kind of cut everything down to the point where uh, it was almost like Twitter writing. Like, how can I use the fewest amount of words and not feel like
Uh-huh.
I'm cheating the reader?
Yeah, yeah.
And then of course Gretchen had her comments on it, as well as did Max. So finally we got down to something that hopefully works. And I'm actually, I'm very seldom happy with stuff I do, but I'm actually very happy with this.
Fantastic. That's awesome. Well, yeah, it's a brilliant album. It's really hard to say any much more about it verbally that really does it justice, because it's just an incredible record, and I love that it's a bigger concept and that you're part of that. That's fantastic. What else is coming up for you? I guess, I mean, the GP stuff this year is obviously going to be a big focus. Are there any other creative works you've got on the side that you want to get started or you're working on?
Well, I'm trying to put together a book of 20 years of being editor of GP. I
Hmm.
mean, just by hook or crook or luck, I'm the longest sitting editor of the magazine.
Yeah, I
So
should have mentioned that.
I,
Absolutely, that's a big deal.
yeah, so I wanted to put together um, some of the bigger interviews that I've done since being there in 1997, or starting there in 1997. So there's that. Um, the trouble with Monkeys got a deal through Universal where they wanted us to do half of the Monkey songs punked up and then half original songs in the style of the Monkeys. So
Hmm.
I'm working on that with the band. Um, I'm also Daniele has decided that now he wants to do a concept album based on Dante's Purgatorio. So
Okay.
I'm working with him as far as coming up with something, on the same level as Gretchen. Can I come up with a libretto or something that would help the pieces that he's writing,
Okay. Yep.
or inform the pieces he's writing. I'm not sure whether Max is going to be involved with that as a visual artist or not, but
Sure.
Gretchen's idea is like, to have this team,
Yep. Yep.
where she's exhausted from doing Inferno, Dante does Purgatorio, and then maybe she comes back and does the third volume,
Cool.
later on.
That sounds really cool.
Yeah, so I think that'll be a lot of fun. I got Guitar Player Records started up again, so we're doing our first release called Awesome Instrumentals, which is Stormy Weather, which is guitar instrumentals based on the concept of a emotional or a meteorological storm.
Okay.
But once again, did that equitably. There's the format for these Guitar Player Records instrumentals is 2 stars. So for the first one, I've got Steve Hunter and Anna Popovic, and then 4 men, 4 women.
Okay.
So it's of all different styles and ages. So it's going to be very stylistically and diverse. So I'm really proud of that.
Yeah, cool. Did Jude Gold get a track on one of those records? Did I
did,
read that
yeah.
right? Yeah.
Jude Gold needs to actually get me the track for that record, but
Okay.
Jude, if you're listening, please turn it in.
Hey man, we had Jude on the show a little while ago, and he was fantastic to talk to as well. So I love his stuff. So yeah, man, get that track in.
Yeah, I'm waiting.
Awesome.
So yeah, I mean, it should be a good year. I mean, as you said, most of my focus is just to make sure that the magazine gets its due.
Yep.
And then if I get to have a personal life in between that would be awesome.
That sounds good if you can squeeze that in. Fantastic. Well, Mike, thank you so much for your time. You've obviously got so much going on, so I really appreciate you spending the time with us today. And for me, it's a thrill because I've read your stuff for a long time. So to actually meet you is pretty cool for me as well, and to find out a little bit more about your own backstory as well. So yeah, thank you so much for being on the Guitar Speak podcast today.
Well, you've been very nice to invite me. I really appreciate that, and thank you so much. I hope you have an awesome year ahead as well.
All right, that was my conversation with Michael Molenda. I so enjoyed meeting him. That was really cool, and really amazing to hear about his career and how it led him to GP, all the wonderful stuff GP's doing this year, and the amazing impact that magazine has had on the guitar community all around the world. Very, very cool. Now, after the interview, I emailed Jude Gold. I said, hey man, where's your track? Where's that recording? And he emailed back he was recording the lead guitar that very day, in fact. So that was kind of cool. I was already speaking to Michael. We'd already traded a few emails, but Jude was one who said, hey, you might like to talk to Michael about the 50th anniversary of Guitar Player. So thank you again, Jude. Also, since the interview with Michael, since I recorded it, I have read the libretto which accompanies the Gretchen Menn album, and it obviously adds a lot of depth. I knew the story and the narrative in a broad sense, but seeing how it was specifically reimagined for that project was really cool, and yeah, adds so much to the music. I've been in touch with Gretchen. We are going to speak in the next few weeks about that album, Abandon All Hope, so I'm really looking forward to that as well. Alright, thank you so much for tuning into the Guitar Speak podcast. Remember, you can subscribe to us on iTunes or Stitcher or plenty of other places where you get your podcasts. We're on Facebook and Instagram, and also guitarspeakpodcast.libsyn.com. For those of you, if you're enjoying the episodes, why not share them around? That makes a great difference to us, and we always love to hear from you on any of those forums, those social media forums as well. Awesome, good stuff. We've got some big interviews coming up. I'm interviewing one of my childhood heroes this week. So excited. Can't wait to share that with you, plus a bunch of other interviews I've already done. So do not adjust your set. Stay tuned. and I'll catch you next time on the Guitar Speak podcast. My name's Matt Wakeling. See you next time.